A fortnight before our wedding, my fiancée sent me a message. Good news, I'm pregnant. But I think my ex should be on the birth certificate, it just feels right. I'd been staring at my phone for what felt like hours, reading those words over and over again. 2 weeks before we were supposed to say our vows in Vegas, and Samantha drops this bombshell like it's completely normal. I'm a financial analyst, trained to spot inconsistencies in data, but nothing in my professional experience prepared me for this kind of emotional arithmetic that just didn't add up. The first part of her text had sent me into orbit. We'd been trying for months, and finally it was happening. I actually jumped up from my desk at the Phoenix branch office and did a little fist pump, probably looking like an idiot to my coworkers. For about 30 seconds, I was the happiest man alive. I was already mentally calculating childcare costs, college savings plans, maybe upgrading to a 3-bedroom apartment in Scottsdale. I'd even started drafting a text to my parents when the second part of her message registered. But then I read the rest of it. I think my ex should be on the birth certificate, it just feels right. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I read it again, then screenshot it, then read it a third time to make sure I wasn't having some kind of breakdown. The words didn't change. They sat there on my screen like a financial statement that showed massive losses where there should have been gains. Riley. She was talking about Riley, her ex-boyfriend from college who'd somehow wormed his way back into conversations over the past few months. Riley thinks I should try that new yoga studio. Riley mentioned this great restaurant we should check out. Riley says Phoenix housing market is going to crash soon. Riley believes couples should have separate bank accounts. Every conversation lately seemed to include some pearl of wisdom from Riley, like he was some kind of relationship guru instead of a construction supervisor who'd cheated on his previous girlfriend. I'd been annoyed by the constant Riley references, but I trusted Samantha. We'd been together for 2 years, engaged for 8 months, and I thought we had something solid. Something real. Something worth building a life around. She'd moved into my downtown apartment 6 months ago, we'd merged our Netflix accounts, started shopping for wedding rings together. Normal couple things that normal couples do when they're planning a normal future. But this text message was like finding a calculation error that unraveled an entire financial model. The timeline started clicking in my head with horrible clarity. When was the last time we'd been intimate? 3 weeks ago, maybe a month? She'd been distant lately, claiming stress from wedding planning, working late at her marketing job, always tired, always on her phone. Always finding reasons to postpone physical intimacy. I'm just so exhausted from the wedding planning. Work has been absolutely insane lately. Can we just cuddle tonight? And now she's pregnant and thinks her ex should be on the birth certificate because it feels right? I sat in my cubicle, watching the Phoenix skyline shimmer in the afternoon heat, trying to process what this meant. My coworker Dave walked by carrying his coffee mug, probably noticed my expression. You look like someone just told you the market crashed, he said with a laugh. If only it were that simple. Either my fiancée had lost her mind, or she was telling me something without actually telling me. The worst part was how casual she made it sound, like suggesting where to go for dinner. Hey babe, I'm carrying someone else's baby but let's put his name on the paperwork because vibes. My hands were actually shaking as I typed back. What do you mean it feels right? Why would Riley be on our baby's birth certificate? The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Then nothing for 10 minutes. I could practically see her panicking, trying to figure out how to explain something that couldn't be explained away. When she finally responded, it was just, "Can we talk about this when you get home? It's complicated." Complicated. That's what you call a difficult client presentation or a challenging investment portfolio. You don't call paternity complicated unless there's something fundamentally wrong with the situation. Unless the math doesn't work out the way it's supposed to. Unless someone's been cooking the books. I spent the rest of my workday staring at spreadsheets without seeing them, my mind racing through every interaction we'd had over the past 2 months. The late nights she blamed on her marketing campaigns for local restaurants. The new workout clothes she didn't seem to wear to any gym I knew about. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner, jumping every time it buzzed. The mysterious text messages she'd claim were from her sister, but her sister lived in Seattle and worked normal hours. All those little things I'd dismissed as pre-wedding stress now looked like something entirely different. They looked like the behavior patterns of someone living a double life. By 5 p.m., I'd made a decision that would have shocked the old me, the trusting version who believed in benefit of the doubt and healthy communication. I wasn't going home to talk about why my pregnant fiancée thought another man's name belonged on our child's birth certificate. I was going to get some answers that didn't involve her carefully crafted explanations and tears and promises that everything was fine. I was going to drive to Riley's house in suburban Phoenix and have a conversation with his wife Jessica, the woman who had no idea her husband had been providing fatherly advice to my fiancé. I drove to Riley's suburban Phoenix home with my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me sane. His address wasn't hard to find. Samantha had mentioned their housewarming party last year, back when I thought Riley was just harmless background noise from her past. The house was a modest 2-story in a family neighborhood, complete with a swing set in the backyard and a minivan in the driveway next to Riley's pickup truck. Normal people living a normal life, or so I thought. When I knocked on the door, a woman in her late 20s answered, holding a toddler on her hip. Jessica. I'd seen her in Samantha's social media posts occasionally, blonde, pretty, with tired eyes that suggested the reality of motherhood wasn't quite matching the Instagram version. She looked at me with polite confusion until I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm engaged to Samantha Wells. I think we need to talk about your husband. The change in her expression was immediate and devastating. Her face went from curious to knowing to absolutely heartbroken in about 3 seconds. She didn't ask who Samantha was. She didn't look confused. She just stepped back and said, "Come in. Let me put Emma down for her nap." That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Jessica already suspected something was wrong. She'd been living with the same gnawing feeling I'd had for weeks, probably longer. While she settled the toddler upstairs, I looked around their living room. Family photos everywhere, vacation pictures, wedding photos from what looked like a beach ceremony. Riley and Jessica looked genuinely happy in those pictures, the way Samantha and I used to look before everything started feeling forced and complicated. Jessica came back down and sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap like she was bracing for impact. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Known what exactly?" "About Riley and your fiancé. About whatever's been going on between them." I pulled out my phone and showed her Samantha's text message. Jessica read it twice, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Oh God. Oh my God. She's pregnant. That's what she says. And apparently she thinks Riley should be on the birth certificate because it feels right." Jessica put her face in her hands. I knew something was wrong. Riley's been working late constantly, saying he's picking up extra shifts for overtime. But his paychecks haven't been any bigger. He's been secretive with his phone, jumping in the shower the minute he gets home like he's washing something off. And he's been... She paused, collecting herself. He's been different in bed. Distant. Like his mind was somewhere else. I felt sick hearing this confirmation of what I'd already suspected. "When did you start noticing changes?" "About 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months. Right around the time he started mentioning your fiancé's name more often. Samantha says this restaurant is great. Samantha thinks we should refinance the house." I thought it was weird that he was suddenly so interested in the opinions of some woman I'd met maybe twice, but I never imagined. She trailed off, then looked at me directly. "Do you really think the baby could be his?" The timing lines up. Samantha and I haven't been intimate in weeks. She's been finding excuses to avoid it, claiming stress from wedding planning. But if she's pregnant and suggesting Riley's name for the birth certificate, then she's telling you without telling you. Jessica finished my thought. "God, I can't believe this is happening. We just bought this house. Emma's barely 2 years old. I thought we were building something together." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes, two people whose lives were imploding because of choices other people made. Then I heard a truck door slam in the driveway. Jessica's face went pale. "That's Riley. He's home early." Through the front window, I watched Riley walk toward the house, still in his construction clothes, looking tired and completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. When he opened the front door and saw me sitting in his living room, his face went through the same series of expressions Jessica's had: confusion, recognition, then pure panic. "Jacob? What are you doing here?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "Having a conversation with your wife about my pregnant fiancée and her interesting ideas about birth certificates." Riley looked between Jessica and me, probably calculating how much we'd already figured out. "I don't know what Samantha told you, but whatever you think is happening, she didn't tell me anything directly," I interrupted. "She just sent me a text saying she's pregnant and thinks you should be on the birth certificate because it feels right. Your wife and I have been comparing notes about your recent behavior patterns." Riley's face went red, then white. He looked at Jessica, who was staring at him with the kind of expression that meant their marriage was over whether he admitted anything or not. "Jess, I can explain." "Explain what, Riley? Explain why another woman thinks you should be on her baby's birth certificate? Explain why you've been coming home late and jumping in the shower like you're washing off evidence? Explain why you've been mentioning her name constantly for the past 2 months." Jessica's voice was getting louder, angrier. "There's nothing to explain," Riley said weakly, but his body language was screaming guilt. "We're just friends. Samantha's been going through a tough time with wedding planning stress, and I've been trying to help her work through some things. What kind of things require you to work late and come home needing immediate showers?" I asked. Riley didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there in his work boots, looking like a man who'd been caught red-handed and was desperately trying to figure out how to talk his way out of it. But there was no talking out of this one. The evidence was too clear, the timing too convenient, and his panic too obvious. I left Riley and Jessica to figure out their own mess and drove straight to Samantha's downtown apartment, the one she'd kept even after moving most of her stuff into my place. She claimed she needed it for work storage and as a backup plan, which should have been another warning sign I'd ignored. When I knocked, she opened the door wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, looking like she'd been crying. Her face lit up when she saw me, probably thinking I was coming home to celebrate the pregnancy news. "Jacob, I was hoping you'd come by. We really need to talk about—" "I just came from Riley's house," I said, pushing past her into the apartment. "Had a very interesting conversation with his wife Jessica." The color drained from Samantha's face so fast I thought she might faint. She grabbed the back of her couch for support, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words that wouldn't come. "You did what?" "I showed Jessica your text message. The one about putting Riley's name on the birth certificate because it feels right." She wasn't surprised, Samantha. She'd already been noticing his strange behavior for the past 2 months. Late nights, secretive phone calls, jumping in the shower the moment he got home. Samantha sank onto her couch, shaking her head like she could somehow make this conversation disappear. "Jacob, you don't understand. It's not what you think, then explain it to me. Explain why you think your ex-boyfriend should be on our baby's birth certificate. Explain why the timing of your pregnancy perfectly aligns with when you started mentioning Riley constantly. Explain why we haven't been intimate in weeks but somehow you're pregnant." She started crying then, the ugly kind of crying that comes with genuine panic and shame. "I made a mistake. It was just one time, and then it became a few times, and then—" "Then what, Samantha? Then you decided to string me along until the wedding while carrying another man's child." "No. It wasn't like that. Riley and we have history. When we reconnected a few months ago, all these old feelings came back. You were working so much, always focused on your career and financial planning, and Riley was just so present and available, so you decided to cheat on your fiancée because I was building a stable future for us. The blame shifting was incredible. I was the problem for being responsible and career-focused. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were just talking about our college days, remembering what we used to have together. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were meeting regularly. It felt like being young again before all the pressure and expectations. How long, Samantha? How long has this been going on?" She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking like a child who'd been caught stealing. "About a month. Maybe 6 weeks. It started right after you got that promotion and started talking about buying a house and planning our future so specifically. I felt trapped, like my whole life was being decided without my input. A month to 6 weeks. The exact time frame that lined up with her pregnancy and her sudden distance from me. So instead of talking to me about feeling trapped, you decided to have an affair with a married man and get pregnant. I didn't plan to get pregnant. We were careful most of the time, but there was one night where things got carried away and, most of the time, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How many times are we talking about here? I don't know. Maybe 10 or 12 times over the past month and a half. It wasn't some grand romance, Jacob. It was just physical comfort when I was feeling overwhelmed. 10 or 12 times. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a sustained affair that had been going on for weeks while she was planning our wedding and living in my apartment. And you're sure the baby is his? She hesitated just long enough to confirm my worst fears. I think so. The timing makes more sense with Riley than with you, especially since we haven't been. Since you've been avoiding intimacy with me while having regular sex with him. I was confused. I didn't know how to handle what I was feeling. Part of me wanted the security and stability you offered, but part of me missed the excitement and spontaneity I had with Riley. I thought I could figure it out after the wedding, maybe end things with him and focus on our marriage. You thought you could figure it out after we were legally bound together and I'd be harder to leave. The calculation in her plan was breathtaking. That's not fair. I do love you, Jacob. I love the life we could build together. But Riley represents this other part of me, this more adventurous and carefree version of myself that I thought I'd lost. The version that cheats on her fiancé and gets pregnant by a married man? Don't make me sound like some terrible person. I made a mistake, yes, but people make mistakes all the time. We can work through this if you're willing to try. I looked around her apartment, noticing things I'd missed before. A men's construction jacket hanging on the back of a chair. Work boots by the door that were definitely not mine. Evidence of Riley's presence that had been hiding in plain sight. You want me to raise another man's child while you continue your affair? I ended things with Riley yesterday when I found out about the pregnancy. I chose you, Jacob. I chose our future together. You chose me after you got pregnant by him and realized you needed financial support for a baby. That's not true. I chose you because I realized what we have is real and lasting. What Riley and I had was just nostalgia and physical attraction. I walked to her closet and started pulling out the clothes she'd left at my place, throwing them onto the bed. What are you doing? Helping you pack. You need to leave my apartment tonight. Jacob, please. We can work through this. People get past infidelity all the time. The baby doesn't have to change anything between us. The baby changes everything, Samantha. You're carrying another man's child, and instead of being honest about it, you sent me a text suggesting he should be on the birth certificate. You weren't planning to tell me the truth. You were planning to manipulate me into accepting a situation where I raise his child while you keep all your options open. She followed me around the apartment as I gathered her belongings, pleading and making promises she had no intention of keeping. I'll take a paternity test. We'll prove it's yours. We both know what that test will show. Then we'll figure something else out. Maybe Riley will take responsibility, or maybe we can make this work somehow. There is no anymore, Samantha. You made that choice when you decided to build a relationship with another man while planning a wedding with me. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to a private laboratory in Phoenix that specialized in paternity testing. I'd done my research the night before, reading about prenatal DNA testing and finding a facility that could handle discrete testing without requiring both potential fathers to be present. The irony wasn't lost on me that my analytical skills, the same ones Samantha found boring and overly practical, were now being used to uncover the truth about her betrayal. I'd managed to collect what I needed from Riley's house during our confrontation. He'd been drinking from a beer bottle that I'd quietly pocketed when Jessica wasn't looking. From Samantha's apartment, I'd taken her toothbrush and a hair tie that still had strands attached. The lab technician, a professional woman in her 40s, explained the process with clinical detachment. Prenatal paternity testing can be done as early as 8 weeks into pregnancy using a simple blood draw from the mother and DNA samples from potential fathers. Results are 99.9% accurate and typically available within 3 to 5 business days. I paid the $1,800 fee without flinching. After months of spending money on wedding deposits and Samantha's expensive tastes, this felt like the first worthwhile investment I'd made in a long time. While waiting for the results, I started making other calls. The kind of calls that felt both devastating and liberating. First, I called the Bellagio in Las Vegas. I need to cancel a wedding package scheduled for next weekend. The events coordinator was sympathetic but firm about their cancellation policy. I'd lose the $3,200 deposit, but avoiding the remaining $8,900 balance felt like dodging a financial bullet. Next was the photographer, who'd already completed our engagement shoot. Another $1,500 down the drain, but she agreed to delete all the photos rather than deliver them. The florist was more understanding, probably because she'd seen this situation before. She offered to resell our arrangements to another couple and refund half our $2,100 payment. The caterer was the most expensive cancellation, $4,800 lost because they'd already ordered specialty ingredients for our menu. Each phone call felt like dismantling a life I'd thought we were building together. By the end of the day, I'd canceled everything wedding-related and calculated the total damage, $12,400 in non-refundable deposits and fees. Money I'd saved over months of careful budgeting, gone because my fiancée couldn't keep her legs closed around her ex-boyfriend. But the financial loss was nothing compared to the emotional relief of not having to pretend everything was normal for another week. 3 days later, the lab called with results that confirmed what I already knew in my gut. Mr. Harrison? This is Dr. Patricia Wong from Phoenix Genetic Testing. I have your paternity results. The probability of paternity between the submitted male sample and the fetus is 0%. There is no biological relationship. 0%. Not 1%, not even a statistical margin of error. Complete and total confirmation that I'd been played by someone I'd trusted with my future. I immediately forwarded the results to Jessica, along with a brief message. Thought you should have this for your divorce proceedings. I'm sorry we both had to go through this. Her response came within an hour. Thank you for getting the truth. I've already contacted a lawyer. Riley moved out yesterday after I confronted him with everything we discussed. I hope you're doing okay. I wasn't okay, but I was getting better every day that passed without Samantha's manipulation and drama in my life. The paternity results gave me leverage I hadn't expected. I called Samantha and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where she couldn't make a scene or try to seduce me into forgiveness. She showed up looking hopeful, probably thinking I'd come around to the idea of raising another man's child. I got the paternity results back, I said, sliding the lab report across the table. She read it twice, her face going through the same progression of emotions I'd watched Riley experience. Shock, then resignation, then panic about what this meant for her future. Jacob, this doesn't change how I feel about you. We can still make this work. This changes everything, Samantha. You're carrying Riley's child, and now we have scientific proof. Which means you've been lying to me for weeks about the timeline, the paternity, and pretty much everything else about this situation. I wasn't lying exactly. I was hoping it might be yours. Hoping. You were hoping to trick me into raising another man's child because that was more convenient than dealing with the consequences of your affair. She started crying again, but I felt nothing watching her tears. Funny how quickly you can stop caring about someone's emotional manipulation once you see it clearly. What do you want from me, Jacob? I know I messed up, but I can't undo what happened. I want you to take financial responsibility for the choices you made. Starting with paying me back for the wedding expenses I lost because of your infidelity. I pulled out a detailed spreadsheet I'd prepared, listing every canceled vendor and lost deposit. $12,400. I have receipts for everything. Her eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't have savings like you do. Then you'll figure out a payment plan. Because the alternative is me filing a lawsuit for fraud and emotional damages, and trust me, I have enough documentation to make your life very uncomfortable in court. You're being cruel. I'm being practical. You made choices that cost me financially and emotionally. I'm simply asking you to take responsibility for the consequences. I also forwarded the paternity results to both sets of parents, along with a brief explanation of the situation. If Samantha wanted to play victim and claim I was being unreasonable, she could explain to her family why another man's name belonged on her baby's birth certificate. Her parents called me that evening, mortified by their daughter's behavior and desperate to avoid any legal complications. Jacob, we had no idea Samantha was capable of something like this. We're so sorry you've been put through this situation. Her father, a decent man who'd always treated me with respect, sounded genuinely ashamed. We'd like to help with the financial damages if that would prevent this from becoming a legal matter. I appreciate that, Mr. Wells. I'm not trying to destroy your daughter, but I also can't absorb a $12,000 loss because she decided to cheat on me 2 weeks before our wedding. We worked out an arrangement where her parents would cover $8,000 of the wedding costs, with Samantha responsible for the remaining $4,400 through monthly payments. It wasn't full restitution, but it was acknowledgement that actions have consequences, even when you're someone's precious daughter. Meanwhile, my own life was improving dramatically without the constant stress of Samantha's drama and financial demands. I got promoted to senior analyst after successfully managing a complex merger analysis that saved our firm's clients several $1,000,000. The promotion came with an $18,000 salary increase and the opportunity to work remotely part-time, which meant I could move to a better apartment in Scottsdale without worrying about commute times. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of constantly managing someone else's emotional crises and poor decisions. 2 weeks after the paternity results came back, I decided it was time for a family meeting that would put everything on the record. I'd been getting calls from mutual friends who'd heard conflicting stories about why our wedding was canceled, and Samantha had apparently been spinning a narrative that painted me as the unreasonable party who couldn't handle relationship challenges. I arranged to meet both sets of parents at a restaurant in Central Phoenix, bringing copies of all the evidence I'd collected. The paternity test results, screenshots of Samantha's original text message, documentation of all the canceled wedding expenses, and a timeline showing when her affair had started relative to our wedding planning. I wanted everything laid out clearly so there could be no confusion about who was responsible for this disaster. Samantha's parents arrived first, looking uncomfortable and embarrassed. Her mother, Patricia, had always been polite to me but never quite warm, probably because she thought her daughter could do better than a middle-class financial analyst. Her father, Robert, was a decent man who worked in construction management and seemed genuinely sorry about the situation. My own parents showed up looking confused but supportive, the way they always did when I needed them. When Samantha arrived with her parents, she looked like she'd been crying for days. Probably because Riley had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby, and she was finally facing the reality that her choices had consequences. I started the meeting by laying out the timeline methodically, like presenting a case to clients. 6 weeks ago, Samantha began an affair with Riley Thompson, a married man with a 2-year-old daughter. This affair continued for approximately a month while she was living in my apartment and planning our wedding. When she discovered she was pregnant, instead of being honest about the situation, she sent me a text message suggesting her ex-boyfriend should be on the birth certificate because it felt right. I showed everyone the text message on my phone. Patricia Wells actually gasped when she read it, covering her mouth with her hand. The paternity test confirms that Riley is the biological father with 0 probability that I'm involved. This means Samantha was planning to trick me into raising another man's child while continuing to lie about the affair. Samantha, her mother said quietly, is this all true? Samantha looked around the table like a cornered animal. I made mistakes, yes, but Jacob is making this sound much worse than it was. I was confused about my feelings and made some poor choices, but I never intended to hurt anyone. You intended to marry me while carrying another man's child, I said. You intended to put his name on the birth certificate without telling me the truth. Those aren't accidents or confusion. Those are deliberate choices to deceive me. The affair was wrong, she admitted, but I ended it when I realized I wanted to be with Jacob. The pregnancy was unplanned, and I panicked about how to handle it. You panicked, So you decided to lie to everyone involved. Riley's wife, me, both our families. You were going to let me raise his child while he stayed married to someone else, and none of us would have known the truth. My father, who rarely spoke up in emotional situations, cleared his throat. Samantha, help me understand something. If you knew there was a chance this baby wasn't Jacob's, why didn't you postpone the wedding until you could figure things out? I thought we could work through it, she said weakly. I thought if Jacob and I got married, it would help me move past what happened with Riley. So your plan was to lock Jacob into marriage before telling him the truth about the baby's paternity? Robert Wells looked mortified. That's not what I meant. I was hoping the baby might be Jacob's, and if we were married, it would give us a stronger foundation to build from. Even after you knew the affair timeline made that unlikely, I added. Even after you suggested Riley's name for the birth certificate. The evidence was overwhelming, and even Samantha's parents could see that their daughter had been planning an elaborate deception. Patricia started crying, probably realizing that her daughter's reputation in their social circle was destroyed. What do you need from us, Jacob? Robert asked. I want acknowledgement that this situation was created by Samantha's choices, not by any failure on my part to be understanding or supportive. I want the wedding expenses reimbursed since the cancellation was due to her infidelity. And I want it understood that I have no legal or moral obligation to this child. Of course, Robert said immediately. We'll handle the financial part. Samantha will pay you back every dollar, even if we have to help her do it. I also want it clear that any story Samantha tells about why our relationship ended should include the fact that she was having an affair and got pregnant by another man. I won't be painted as the villain because I refuse to raise someone else's child. That's fair, my mother said, speaking for the first time. Our son has been nothing but responsible and caring throughout this relationship. He doesn't deserve to have his reputation damaged because he wouldn't accept being deceived. Samantha tried one last manipulation. I know I made terrible mistakes, but doesn't 3 years together count for anything? Don't I deserve a chance to make this right? You had 3 years to be honest with me, I replied. You had dozens of opportunities to address whatever problems you were having in our relationship. Instead, you chose to have an affair, get pregnant, and plan to trick me into marriage. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal. The meeting ended with concrete agreements about financial restitution and a clear understanding that Samantha would take full responsibility for her choices when explaining the situation to friends and extended family. Her parents looked devastated but resigned to dealing with the consequences of their daughter's actions. As we left the restaurant, my father put his hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of how you handled this, son. A lot of men would have either exploded in anger or been manipulated into accepting an impossible situation. You stayed calm and protected yourself without being cruel. It didn't feel calm, I admitted. It felt like my whole life was falling apart. But you handled it like an adult, and that's what matters. You'll find someone who deserves the kind of loyalty and planning you put into relationships. He was right. Within a month, word had gotten around our social circle about what really happened, and several people reached out to express support and share their own stories about dodging bullets with unfaithful partners. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how someone tries to spin the narrative. 6 months later, I was settling into my new apartment in Scottsdale when I got a call from Jessica. Riley's marriage had officially ended, and the fallout was exactly what you'd expect when a man destroys 2 families for a few weeks of selfish gratification. I thought you should know, Jessica said, her voice stronger than it had been during our first conversation. Riley's been struggling since everything came out. He lost his supervisor position at the construction company because the drama affected his work relationships, and now he's just a regular crew member making about half what he used to earn. The irony was perfect. Riley had thrown away his marriage and career for an affair with someone who didn't even want him once the excitement wore off. What about Samantha and the baby? I asked, genuinely curious about how that situation was playing out. From what I hear through mutual acquaintances, she's working 2 part-time jobs to support herself and prepare for the baby. Riley pays court-ordered child support, but he made it clear he doesn't want any actual parenting responsibilities. He views the whole thing as an expensive mistake that ruined his life. So Riley was paying for a child he didn't want while Jessica got to rebuild her life without a cheating husband dragging her down. Sometimes karma works exactly the way it should. How's Emma handling everything? She's actually doing better than I expected. Kids are resilient, and honestly, Riley was already checked out of family life before the affair became obvious. We're in therapy together, working through the transition, but she's adapting well to it being just the two of us. Jessica had gotten a substantial settlement in the divorce, including the house and primary custody of their daughter. Riley was stuck in a studio apartment across town, paying child support for 2 kids he'd see maybe once a month if he bothered to show up for visitation. Meanwhile, my own life was flourishing in ways I hadn't expected. The promotion had led to additional responsibilities that I actually enjoyed, working with high-net-worth clients on complex investment strategies. I'd also started dating again, carefully this time, with a much better understanding of what genuine compatibility looked like versus superficial attraction. I met Lauren at a professional networking event for financial services. She was a certified financial planner who specialized in retirement planning for women, brilliant and funny with the kind of dry sense of humor that made even boring industry discussions entertaining. More importantly, she was someone who understood the value of financial stability and long-term planning, rather than seeing those qualities as limitations on her fun. Our first few dates involved actual conversations about goals and values, the kind of foundational discussions I'd never really had with Samantha because I'd been too distracted by her looks and too willing to accommodate her whims. Lauren and I talked about career ambitions, family planning, financial philosophies, and life goals with the kind of honesty that only comes when both people are genuinely interested in building something sustainable together. 3 months into dating Lauren, I ran into Samantha at a Phoenix grocery store. She was visibly pregnant now, probably 7 or 8 months along, struggling to manage a cart while looking exhausted in a way that went beyond normal pregnancy fatigue. She was working retail jobs to support herself, and it showed in everything from her discount store clothes to the tired look in her eyes. When she saw me, there was a moment of panic followed by what looked like genuine regret. Not regret for the affair or the lies, but regret for losing the financial security and stable future I'd represented. "Jacob," she said quietly, like she was afraid of making a scene. "Hi, Samantha. How are you handling everything?" "It's been difficult, but I'm managing. Working at 2 different stores to save up for when the baby comes." She looked at me hopefully, probably wondering if I'd softened enough to offer help or sympathy. I heard Riley's paying child support but not involved otherwise. He made it clear he considers this whole situation a mistake that ruined his marriage. He sends the court-ordered payments but doesn't want anything to do with actual parenting. There was bitterness in her voice, the realization that her exciting affair partner had turned out to be just as selfish and unreliable as his willingness to cheat on his wife had suggested. "I'm sorry it worked out that way," I said, and meant it in the same way you'd feel sorry for anyone dealing with the consequences of poor choices. "I hope you're able to build a good life for yourself and the baby." She nodded, probably recognizing that this was as much sympathy as she was going to get from me. There was no anger left, no desire for revenge or vindication. Just the mild sadness you feel when you see someone who had opportunities and wasted them through their own selfishness. A year later, I was reviewing investment portfolios in my home office when Lauren walked in with coffee and that particular smile that meant she had news to share. We'd been living together for 3 months in a house we'd bought jointly in Scottsdale, the kind of adult relationship milestone that felt natural and exciting rather than forced or manipulative. "Jessica called," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Thought you'd want to hear the latest update on the Riley situation." I'd stayed loosely in touch with Jessica through occasional texts, partly because she'd been genuinely helpful during the divorce proceedings and partly because there was something satisfying about watching karma work its way through the lives of people who'd caused so much unnecessary drama. "Riley missed his child support payments for the 3rd month in a row," Lauren continued. "Apparently he got fired from another construction job for showing up late and hungover too many times. Jessica's lawyer is pursuing wage garnishment, but you can't garnish wages from someone who keeps getting fired." The downward spiral was predictable but still impressive in its completeness. Riley had gone from being a construction supervisor with a stable marriage and comfortable suburban life to being a deadbeat dad bouncing between entry-level jobs and making everyone around him miserable. What about Samantha? Jessica heard through mutual friends that she's moved back in with her parents because she couldn't afford childcare and rent on retail wages. The baby's healthy, but Riley has never even met his daughter. Sends the court-ordered payments when he has work, but refuses any actual contact. I closed my laptop and looked out at the backyard Lauren and I had been landscaping together, thinking about how different my life looked now compared to where it would have been if Samantha hadn't sent that text message. If she'd been smarter about her deception, I might have married her, spent years raising another man's child, and never discovered the truth about who I was really dealing with. You know what's strange? I told Lauren. I'm actually grateful she was stupid enough to mention Riley's name in that text. If she'd been better at lying, I could have ended up trapped in a marriage built on deception. Sometimes the worst betrayals are actually the biggest favors, Lauren agreed. Though I doubt Samantha sees it that way. We'd heard through the social media grapevine that Samantha had tried dating a few times since the baby was born, but single motherhood combined with her reputation for infidelity made her a tough sell in the Phoenix dating market. Most decent men weren't interested in someone who'd cheated on her fiancé and gotten pregnant by a married man, while the men who were interested weren't the kind you'd want raising your child. Last month, I'd gotten engaged to Lauren in the most natural, honest way possible. We'd been discussing marriage for weeks, planning timelines and talking through logistics like the mature adults we were. When I proposed, it was confirmation of a decision we'd already made together rather than some dramatic surprise designed to pressure her into saying yes. Our engagement announcement on social media was simple and genuine, focused on our excitement about building a future together rather than showing off an expensive ring or elaborate proposal story. The contrast with my previous relationship couldn't have been more obvious to anyone paying attention. 3 months later, we had a small wedding in Sedona with family and close friends, the kind of celebration that focused on commitment rather than performance. The total cost was less than what I'd lost in deposits when Samantha's lies exploded, but it felt infinitely more valuable because it represented something real and lasting. During our honeymoon in Napa Valley, Lauren and I talked about the lessons we'd both learned from previous relationships. How important it was to find someone who shared your values rather than just your interests, someone who saw planning and financial responsibility as attractive qualities rather than limitations on their freedom. I keep thinking about that text message I told her one evening over dinner at a vineyard restaurant. How casually she mentioned putting another man's name on the birth certificate, like it was a minor detail we needed to work out. She probably thought you'd be so invested in the relationship that you'd accept anything rather than lose her, Lauren said. Some people mistake desperation for love and assume everyone else operates the same way. But I'd never been desperate for Samantha's attention, just committed to building something meaningful with someone I'd thought shared my goals. The difference between those two things became crystal clear once I met someone who actually deserved the kind of loyalty and planning I brought to relationships. Now, 2 years after that devastating text message, I was living the life I'd thought I was building with Samantha, except with someone who actually wanted to be there. Someone who appreciated thoughtfulness rather than taking it for granted, who contributed to our partnership rather than just consuming resources, who saw our future as something we were creating together rather than something I was providing for her benefit. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering the truth about someone before it's too late to escape. Samantha's text message had been intended as manipulation, but it ended up being the most honest communication she ever sent me. And for that, in a strange way, I'll always be grateful.